Welcome friends. In today's video, we are going to see the difference between Springs versus Spring Boot. So first we will understand what is Spring. Spring is one of the most popular enterprise application framework in Java. So it is so popular because we can build large scale application with the help of Spring framework. And Spring Boot is an extension of the Spring framework. So this is it is a one type of module of the Spring Boot is a which we can use for the rapid application development purpose. Then Spring is Spring provides some predefined templates. Predefined template means like JDBC, Hibernate, JPA. These are the some advanced template provided by the Spring and so there is no compelling reason to compose a lot of code because of this predefined template. We don't need to write a lot of code in our applications. It is a loose coupling framework. Spring is a loosely coupled framework, and it is easy to test. The dependency injection makes Spring framework as easy to test because we segregate our application logic into the different parts, and it is a very lightweight. Lightweight means within say few MBs we can get ready with the Spring Boot projects. The Spring framework doesn't compile with developer any class or actualize any interfaces. That is the reason it is a non-obtrusive framework. Then fast development, the Spring with the help of Spring dependency injection highlight the Spring framework, and it is backing to different system makes the simple advancement and Java EE application as a fast development. Then powerful reflection it provides. There are different module for the Spring framework like Spring AOP, Spring ORM, Spring DAO, Spring Web, Spring Context, Spring Web MSC, Spring Core. Spring Core is the base module for this Spring framework. And about Spring Boot, it provides some advanced features like auto configuration as well as dependency management. These are the some advanced features provided by Spring Boot. We are going to understand this one by one. So let's get start with this. First, we will understand what is the difference between both of them. So simplification, let's first Spring Boot here. Spring Boot simplify the dependency management. So providing starter set of dependencies that work well together. So with the help of this Spring dependency management, we can easily manage our dependencies in Spring Boot because we don't need to mention version number. For example, let me share my screen once again. If you see inside this dependency, we are not mentioning any version. That is, it is managed by the Spring Boot. Here, if you see, we have added version on the starter form itself. So based on this, it is configuring our the Spring frameworks and the dependencies. It is managed by the Spring Boot itself. That's why it is saying dependency management simplifies by the Spring Boot framework. Then auto configuration, Spring Boot automatically configure component based on the dependencies in your project, reducing boilerplate of code. So means it provide it is a like zero configuration we need to do with the Spring Boot framework as compared to the Spring, because in the Spring we need to manage configuration by like creating XML files as well as view resolver files that we need to mention in the Spring Boot. But as compared to your auto configuration, this Spring Boot automatically configure our dependencies. It provides some starter form. With the help of that, it will add some dependencies which is available, transitive dependencies which is available to the application. For example, here if you see Spring Boot starter parent, so inside this it will automatically download all the dependencies available to the our applications. For example, here starter data JPA, starter web is there. So this will what it will do? It will automatically add some dependencies which is required. For example, here if you see this inside this starter from 3.1, some dependencies we are getting like Spring Boot starter JSON, Spring Boot starter, Spring Boot Tomcat. So embedded Tomcat we are getting. So this all work we have to do in previous Spring framework. So that is reduced by this Spring starter form. Starter form. So it will automatically add these dependencies in our applications. So that is why it is auto configurations. Then embedded server like previously we have to configure the any external server when we are running our application with the Spring Boot. But inside the Spring Boot, we got the embedded Tomcat server. We just need to run our application that will start our application without configuring any embedded Tomcat server. That is the with the help of this we can get the ready to use application, means we don't need to configure this Tomcat. Then next is flexibility. If you see, Spring is more flexible modular framework that allow you to pick and choose the component you need. So what is why this is called flexible? There are different module we can integrate with Spring framework. For example, Spring Web is there. We can use Spring ORM. For example, I want to Hibernate support. At that time, I will use Spring Hibernate. IBATIS support I will use Spring ORM framework. With the help of ORM, we will get this Hibernate support, IBATIS support. Then suppose I want AOP, so source level metadata it will provide. Spring, then Spring Web. Spring with the Spring Web, we can use MVC architecture in our Spring framework. That is called, it is a more flexible and modular framework that allow you to pick to choose the different component. It provides the Spring DO layer, Spring context. So Spring context, it is a application context, UI support, validation, JNDI we can use in this, as well as Spring Web application context or multi-fault resolver. This features is provided by Spring Web. So we can integrate this different module in our application. That is why it is called as a modular and flexible framework. And then Spring Boot is opinionated, is providing sensible default configuration to get started. Means with this Spring Boot, we can quickly get started. Just we need to add few dependencies. For example, to run my application, I will add Spring Boot started web dependency. For to connecting MySQL, I will use MySQL connector, and that's it. For data JPA, I will use data JPA to connect database. So with this minimal three dependencies, I will run my application. So it is called opinionated and sensible default configuration to get started quickly. So we can easily start with Spring Boot. Then balance Spring Boot is a built on top of Spring. So as we have discussed previously, Spring Boot is built on top of the Spring. So you can utilize, customize and extend the framework as needed. So we can do this as per our requirement. We can extend as per our requirement. Then development speed. If we consider development speed, Spring require more setup and configuration to get project started. As we have to add configuration, we need to embed, we need to configure Tomcat, we need to manage dependencies in Spring. That's why it's require more setup and configuration to get project started. Then Spring Boot provide faster development cycle. It is pre-configured setup because it is starter form or it is embedded Tomcat in inbuilt database we can use, like Spring Boot provides inbuilt S2 database for the rapid application development purpose. So with this Spring Boot is faster as compared to the Spring. Then productivity, Spring Boot opinionated approach helps developer to be more productive because the developer focus on the actual business logic, development of business logic instead of configuring configuration part. So that is why it is Spring Boot opinionated approach help developer to be more productive. Then production readiness. Here if you see monitoring, Spring Boot provides some monitoring management tool which will monitor our application or throughout the development process. Like Actuator, it provides Actuator model in Spring Boot provide production ready features like out of box. Means Actuator, what it will do, it will provide some health endpoint as it will check we can do heap dumps, as well as we can check memory, means how many object is created, and that all part we can do with the help of Actuator. Then deployment Spring Boot extends a executable jar, make development to production environment simpler. So it provides some executable jar, so it make deployment production environment simpler. Logging Spring Boot provides robust logging capabilities to easily debugging in production. Means it provides some default logging in our application. With the help of that, we don't need to configure external logging if we want. Then only we can go with external logback configuration. Instead of that, if we don't want, we can use default logging in the Spring Boot as well. Then here we see learning curve for Spring. Spring has a steeper learning curve due to its flexibility and extensive configuration option, as compared to Spring Boot has a more gradual learning curve as it abstract away many of the complexities. And while Spring Boot simplifies development, developer must still understand Spring core concept, because Spring core concept, it is built on top of the Spring. So we must know some basic about Spring as well to get started with Spring. So easy and ready to develop application. Without this, we can develop application, but if we don't know internal, that will be difficult at the time of developments. So that is why it is developer must still understand Spring core concept to know Spring bits. So for this, we have started on Spring series on our channel, guys. Please go and watch some videos on the Spring. In that, I have covered like some basic concept of Spring core, like what is Spring Bean, what is Spring Bean life cycles, that we can you can see on that our channel. So core concept I'm teaching on there. So you guys go and watch that videos. You will understand what is Spring core as well there. Then community and ecosystem, vibrant community support is there for the both Spring and Spring Boot. It provides active community providing support and resources. We will get a lot of resources for this. Ecosystem Spring Boot integrates seamlessly with wide range of third-party libraries and tools. We can use third-party libraries and tool. So it Spring integrates seamlessly with different ecosystems. Then documentation for the developers helps. We have documentation, Spring Boot documentation. With that, we can get started with our troubleshoot our issues on the based on documentations. Use cases. It is important when to use which applications. So when we are developing microservice based application, Spring Boot provide opinionated approach to production ready features. So make it well suited for building microservices. When our application is microservice based, at that time you can go with Spring Boot. Then Spring Web applications. Uh, Spring Boot embedded server and auto configuration make the great choice for the web application development. Means this provide us embedded Tomcat and auto configuration. So with the help of that, we can easily develop our application. When we want enterprise level application, at that time, Spring is more suitable or more popular, we can say, because complex enterprise application or large application we can develop with the help of Spring. So because Spring provides some different module extension like Spring ORM, Spring Web, we have seen in previously, like we can connect with a different layer is there with that we can connect with the help of Springs. So we can integrate that. So whenever we want the enterprise level application, we can go with the Springs. And then choosing the right framework. Uh, Here, if you see project complexity, consider the complexity of the project and choose the framework and that best fits your requirement. What it means, whenever our application, we need to find out which complexity is our application is complex, or we need to start with simple application. At that, based on that, we can choose our application framework. Then development speed. So if you need to get project up and run quickly, Spring Boot may be the better choice. Means whenever you want application as a quicker and ready to use, at that time we can go with Spring Boot. Then team expertise. So factor in your team familiarities with Spring and their willingness to learn the new Spring Boot approach. This is the team X. Then customization needs. If you require high degree of customization, Spring may be more suitable than opinionated Spring Boot. When is Spring more suitable than Spring Boot? If you require high degree of customization, means you want to integrate different layer in your application. At that time, you can go with Spring framework. That is, and here is the conclusion. When to use which framework, like feature simplification. So Spring require more setup as compared to Spring Boot. Spring Boot is a opinionated approach, less boilerplate code. Means there is zero boilerplate code, like we can say, because we don't need to rewrite database connection logic. We just need to add a few dependencies. We don't need to auto configuration. We don't need to manage version control there. We can use the predefined templates. Then flexibility. Spring is highly flexible and modular. As we integrate different layer in Spring, so it is highly flexible and modular. It is opinionated but still customizable. It is customizable because it is developed on top of Spring only. Then development speed, slower is initial setup. So Spring will give us slower initial setup as compared to Spring Boot. Spring Boot provides faster development cycle. Then production readiness require additional setup, and it is built in production ready features. Spring Boot is built in production ready features. Spring require additional setup. While learning curve they have given steeper and graduals. That's all from this video, guys. I hope you have gained some knowledge from these videos. If you like the content of the videos, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching this video, guys.